Now, please welcome CEO of Agoda, Omri Morgenshtern, in conversation with Skift Executive Editor and Founding Editor, Schaal.
Hey everybody, Omri, thank you for being here. So you've been CEO of Agoda since 2022. You had top positions over there for the previous 6 years. When did Agoda become serious about India, and what's your focus now?
So I think Agoda has been, Agoda started maybe from Southeast Asia, but I think we've been looking at India and the growth of India, suspecting that the huge growth is coming, maybe for 4 or 5 to 7 years. Mm-hmm. And I'm happy to be part of that growth as Agoda and as Booking Holdings. What's our strategy now? You know, Agoda's strategy was always big on a few things, and I think we maintained them. One is tech. Fundamentally we believe tech innovation and the speed of market is key. If you want to be successful, it's an e-commerce sort of internet platform. Second one is heavy localization. So what we do is we try to bridge the gap for the people on the ground from everywhere else, right? And try to sell, say, hotel in Japan to an Indian customer as if they book a hotel in Delhi, or vice versa, a hotel in Delhi, or in Gurgaon to a Japanese customer as if they are in Tokyo. Mm-hmm.
So is your focus mostly outbound or domestic?
Specifically with India?
India, yeah.
So I think we start in every country, we start very, very similar to other companies. We start with inbound and outbound, right. But we get a fair share in domestic as well. But I think the growth, obviously there's a huge domestic growth in India, yep. But I think outbound is going to be even bigger than that in terms of growth. And surprisingly, I know people are not discounting inbound to India a lot, but I'm a big believer that this is going to surprise us.
Outbound has to be a lot easier, right, than localizing in India?
So I guess our point of view is if you want to cater for the Indian traveler that goes outbound, you got to localize. Because it doesn't matter where they go, they want to pay with the payment options that they're used to, right? They want the content to be delivered the way they're used to. They want customer support to behave the way they're used to. Right. So you got to localize anyhow, outbound or domestic, it doesn't matter.
You mentioned to me something very interesting about customer support in India. Can you elaborate?
Yeah, so typically we find, so there are many aspects to localization. Obviously there are interfaces to the consumer, interfaces to suppliers, how you work. One of the big areas of localization is actually support. Because you find that if you work on a global basis, you find that different origins, you need different types of support. And the India market tends to be very, very different than other markets. So on average, I think we get 30% per booking. We get 30% more calls in India than anywhere else. On average, the handle time, we measure how long it takes on average to handle a call. It's 30% higher in India than anywhere else. Another thing that is interesting is we always measure that the worst experience that can happen to a traveler is when they step into the hotel and there's no room. You go to the front desk and I'm sorry, there's no room. We measure it very, very carefully and we viciously optimize it out. And our numbers, I'm proud to say, are very, very low everywhere on the planet. India, those numbers tend to be 3 to 4x higher. And with certain partners, I would say even 10x higher than what we see anywhere else. Part of it is overbooking behavior. So we see partners that are assuming they have 120% of the rooms that they really have and then deciding. So there are a lot of those behaviors that we need to support. And then actually it makes us localize a lot of our support, even bringing them to India just to cater to those types of behaviors. Because at the end of the day, when you bring a customer, the customer needs to find a room. And ideally, they need to have a good experience.
You can't win many customers if they show up at the hotel and they don't have a room, right?
No. And you know, I keep saying to my staff, travel is so competitive in getting the customer. Once you got the customer, if you left them with a bad experience, shame on you. Really shame on you.
Brian, can we have the video? We have a Agoda commercial.
एक मिनट जरा इधर आइए। अगर आप ये गोवा के वीडियोस ही देखते रहोगे तो अगोडा पर गोवा वैकेशंस वाले डील्स कब देखोगे? ब्यूटीफुल बीचेस, अमेजिंग फूड और गोवा की नाइट लाइफ एंजॉय करना चाहते हैं तो अपनी ट्रिप अगोडा से प्लान करो। और एक बात, आई एम तो लविंग इट हियर। Agoda.
There it is. So there's something AI-driven about this?
So I think there are two examples of what we call localization that, as I said, is a big part of our strategy globally, not only in India. One is you see Ayushman, local talent. We always cater the messages to local talent. If you see our ads in other places like Indonesia or Japan, they'll be very, very localized to the messages. Another thing that you see, which I think is cool, it's super localized to the city level, the destination level. Actually, this is an ad that we took, and we use Gen AI to alter the lips of Ayushman. And for every city, we have a different version of the same ad, and he'll mention different things to do in that city. And even the photo at the end will be different, and we generated them at scale. So one shot and got all of those ads that we are using, and that's a cool idea of how tech, talked a lot about tech, and localization can work together to do something that is there. And the deeper you are, the better you cater for the customer in our experience.
You have somewhat of a contrarian view about AI in terms of chatbots. And you guys have a chatbot, right?
We have a chat. You got to have a chatbot because sometimes when everybody's doing something, you got to do it. There's a different question whether you believe it's going to be very successful. The reality is, I don't know. I think Gen AI has two sides. There is we can talk about the optimization and efficiencies in customer support and expediting development processes. We can talk about that. There is this side that is consumer-facing. There's a question. There's this fear, I think, whether everything will become a chatbot. Honestly, I don't know. Time will tell, but my hypothesis is no. I think I asked you, I think first time we talked about it, ask you if you think TikTok will become a chatbot, and you were like shocked from the question.
What do you even mean by that?
TikTok is an experience, an exploration experience, right? You slide and you watch. Imagine that you talk to, it's an exploration. Travel is a bit of an exploration. And that's why I think Gen AI will empower our interfaces, but I don't think it will, my point of view, will replace those interfaces. I think you can talk about filters that are smarter, sophisticated, complicated filter. I want to take 3 kids and I'm sure there is a parking. That's where we can do a lot. But I actually think that the exploration side of travel and the interfaces is very, very strong and won't change dramatically.
TikTok and Instagram do a lot better job in personalization than a lot of travel companies.
I don't know if I agree with that. Yeah. I agree that they're doing a great job in personalization. But I think that the travel companies are doing great, at least the ones I'm familiar with in Booking Holdings, are doing a great job in personalizing and have been doing it for a long time. And it's less in the media, but you have to understand that every time you come to the site, every action that you do teaches us something about you that can help us give you better content. And every content is unique. And the more you book, the content becomes more unique. And it drives customer support habits. So a lot of things are happening behind the scenes. A lot of this personalization is happening behind the scenes. You don't see it. It looks the same. But it's highly, highly personalized today. Right.
So tell the truth about Booking.com. Is it a frenemy relationship?
Booking.com?
Yeah.
Best
well, you cooperate on inventory, but you have to compete.
First of all, we're not going to be, Booking Holdings is not going to be the first brand to have a multi-brand strategy.
Right.
Right? My boss is Glenn Fogel, who is the head of BHI, but last I checked, also the CEO of Booking.com.
Right.
So I report to Booking.com, just to be clear. So you, and it's a good advice to always be friends with your boss. Yep. I'll say that. So we run a combined strategy. We talk a lot. There are differences to our strategies, and by the way, sometimes we disagree.
What is the difference in your strategy in India?
So I'd say, generally speaking, Agoda has 2 big differences. One, Agoda is much more, from a geo perspective, there's a much more focus in APAC. From Agoda's perspective, Booking tend to be more global. India is kind of interesting because on the one hand, India is kind of like in between APAC and sort of Europe and the Middle East. So it sits right on the, sort of on the border. So that's one thing. B, Agoda is very, very bullish about localization. I think we take
about organization?
Localization.
Localization, sorry.
So we tend to take it faster to the next stage. So things like payment options on the ground, you'll see that we support all of them, every country. The way they interface will look very, very similar to what local brands are doing. Say things like localizing the customer support that we talked about. Typically, Agoda will be faster doing those things because it's a big part of our strategy. And it's important for Booking.com as well, but typically not in the spotlight as much as it is for Agoda.
Are you localizing enough in India? In
It's never
terms of,
localized enough.
in terms of languages and...
So languages, yes. I think sometimes we decide not. So we used to have Hindi in India. I think we removed it because we couldn't get every 2 years we add Hindi, take it out, add Hindi, take it out because we don't see a lot of people using it. But definitely we have a lot of challenges. And you know, the more you operate in a market and you grow, the more it's like your glasses, you get better resolution. Mm-hmm. So, you know, if you were to ask me 4 years ago, 5 years ago, I wouldn't care about the budget segment that much in India because those weren't our customers. And now all of a sudden we see a lot of those customers on our platform. So all of a sudden they need different things. So the localization takes a different aspect if you cater for those audiences. So it's a never ending, and I can tell you, I come from Japan. 2 weeks ago I was in Japan. In Japan I thought that we localized as much as you can. And I came back from Japan and I understood that we have 2 more years of localization.
Wow.
And India needs equal, if not more, amount of localization than Japan.
So the domestic players would have an advantage, I would imagine, in localization.
They have an advantage in localization, of course. We have other advantages, right? We have, first of all, we have very trustworthy brand. At the end of the day, I think people can lean into us. We know when it comes to inbound, and we all talked about how many of the Indians want to go outbound. Then we have it all. Whether it's on the west or east, wherever you go, we have all the inventory. So there are a lot of strengths that we have. And I'll say another thing, you know, there's room for everybody. This market is growing so fast. We find ourselves collaborating with domestic players a lot. Part of localization for me is realizing that you cannot do it alone. Like no matter what we do, we will not know the market better, not both the consumer and the supplier, by the way, than a player that has been, you know, bread and butter living here.
Right.
The key is to find the win-wins between us, and that's always part of our strategy.
Talk about your pricing strategy in India. Very aggressive. Go ahead.
So I'll say 2 things about Agoda. One thing, I think Agoda is probably the best price intelligence agency when it comes to travel on the planet, right? Because knowing price intelligence is a tech game. If it's tech, you are in our alley. That's where we want it to be, right? So one thing I'll say, we know it all. The second thing, you know, there are certain behaviors where players are trying to put it here and there, and you know, that's part of the industry. We'll find out about it, we'll know it. And the second part of our strategy is we care a lot about our relationships with properties, with hotels, with homes, with chains. And we want to be transparent. Like we have an internal value we call direct and respectful, and we want to use that value everywhere, which means that if we see things, we'll come and tell you, we'll put it on the table, and we'll have a commercial discussion. But we cherish this transparency. And I'll tell you another thing, just because you asked that. I'm sure you know that there is a space with the global chains growing of wholesale distribution platforms. So. Sure, Expedia with Marriott, I think, started it, and there are other players playing. We are playing as well with, we have systems working with the likes of Radisson and Sonesta and Best Western. And as far as I know, the only system out there that does the 2 things that are the most important thing around wholesale distribution for me. Transparency. I want to know where this rate was sold. I want to show you that. I want you to see, Mr. Hotel, this rate that you put here, on what website it was sold, or is it really offline? One. And the second thing, control. I want you to tell me, I don't want it there, shut it down. That doesn't help. As far as I know, we are the only system out there on wholesale distribution that does that. And it doesn't surprise me, well, it surprises me that other systems are not doing it yet. It doesn't surprise me that we are doing it. It goes back to this direct and respectful and transparency with your partners.
So, I mean, hotels can't be very enthusiastic about your undercutting their rates so much. Are you transparent? Do you go to the hotel and say, hey, we're going to sell this room at $150 lower than what you're selling it at?
We are transparent by coming to the partner and saying, you think you're working with those, 40% of your production are coming potentially from third-party players that are telling you that are selling offline, sorry. 80% of it is really online. Here is where it is. We are very, very transparent in that. And then we have a promise to our customers that we give them, we are, I'd say, price obsessed. We give them the best price, and that's a commercial discussion.
So there's a lot of talk, been a lot of talk about the connected trip. Laura talked about it earlier.
Yes.
And you were saying that you feel like Agoda is not more advanced, but evolved, or it's a little further along in India than in some other places?
So it is. Well, I guess I think India requires more than other places. India is more complicated in terms of the connected trip from other places because of those segments. So if you go budget, you need sort of more bus and train. If you go high end, maybe flights. The way the flights industry goes here adds a lot of complexities. Of course, attractions and those religious attractions. How do you get to those? Can you book them online or not? So there are a lot of complexities around that. What I feel is that we are making way there. We're making way at Agoda with first of all, offering those things more and more on our platform, but more importantly, putting them together in a way that when the customer books, they know two things. One is, and it's not a package, right? You add to your, we call it persistent shopping cart. You add to your shopping cart. You can add tomorrow. But when you add to your shopping cart, then ideally you pay less than if you're not part of a shopping cart. It's not part of a package, one. And the second thing, that if you get into trouble, we sort everything out. If you need a delay, you probably need to delay your hotel and your flight and your attraction ticket and everything. We want to be able to do everything for you at once, and I think we are getting better and better at doing that, and also seeing more and more consumers buying to that concept.
Right. I mean, but how often do people book all those elements of a trip on Agoda?
So all of them together, it's still early days,
right.
But I can tell you that more than one component is growing very, very significantly on Agoda.
Okay. An audience question, what do you see for the opportunity for homestays in India?
So it's an interesting space. We're seeing, first of all, we're seeing Airbnb, as you know, doing well in India. We see our sister company doing very well with homestays in India. We do the same. There is definitely a segment that it caters for, but I'd call it a segment. And more you go to secondary city, I guess this segment gets more interesting. Yeah, just India is so big.
Yep.
That what I'll tell you is that almost any segment of accommodation has room to grow and grow significantly, especially with the economy growing so fast, or everything that we see and expect.
So you don't see the glory days of the OTAs being over?
Not at all. Not at all. I think again, if you want to take one message, is there's room for everybody. I think OTAs bring something very, very important to the space. And I think, again, I'll go back to where I started, what we believe in tech. If you want the faster and stronger you are with tech, the more value you can bring to the consumer. That's like where I think that the vision for Agoda, and that's where we start. Fundamentally, we believe that if we can put the features out there faster, experiment, then there will be value. And I think OTAs will be able to do that. Still has a lot to offer in the tech space.
Right. Here's a funny question from the audience. Sorry,
Please.
No offense. Are you planning to acquire TripAdvisor?
I don't think we can.
Oh. You've had enough problems with regulatory people, right?
Yes.
Great. Thank you very much, Omri.
Thank you. Pleasure.
We go this way.